Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. This week's questions answered video is kind of a law enforcement specific question. Now the question was, what can I do to best prepare myself for an active shooter event? If someone was to ask me what was my most passionate focus with teaching and training, it would be active shooter response, active killer interdiction, whatever you want to call it. Both on the citizen side, because they're going to be the common denominator. Every active shooter, I'm going to use that terminology through the video, so let's go with that one. They're going to target citizens. That's going to be the common denominator. They're always going to be there. In rare instances, that shooter may target law enforcement specifically, but I think history shows us, and the law of averages, if you will, shows us that the citizens are going to be the common denominator. But for law enforcement, you're going to respond. Even if you're not there in time to stop the shooter, based on distance and how soon the call comes in and all of these geographical and physical factors that we have to deal with, you're still going. So you're still going with the mindset, hopefully, of I'm going to go in there and I'm going to put in work and stop this guy before he hurts anybody else. The best way for a law enforcement officer, I think, to prepare himself for an active shooter event first is to identify where it's likely to happen in your patrol area. One thing that always appealed to me as a young police officer when it came to the romanticized idea of the old school beat cop, like the Mayberry cop, was that he was out and he was a member of the public. He wasn't removed from it by a police car. He was out there, he was walking around, he had a beat, so to speak, and he would walk around, at least in my romanticized idea of this police officer, and he would talk to the citizenry, and he would interact, and he would know people, and he would be involved in their everyday lives. I think that mentality is the most important mentality when it comes to stopping an active shooter or being the best prepared to stop an active shooter. Now let me make the connection for you. If you're a patrol cop, if you work traffic, if you don't have any calls holding, what are you doing? Are you just sitting in the vehicle? Are you watching traffic? Are you actively seeking out? Or are you taking 5-10 minutes to drive to a public access area such as a movie theater, shopping mall, a grocery store, anywhere that public has access to, getting out of your patrol vehicle, going inside and getting to know the people who work there, and maybe most importantly, or just as important, getting to know the floor plan. Do you know the floor plan and your main employees of the areas where a shooting is most likely to occur? I think that's monumentally important when it comes to preparing yourself to give yourself an advantage when it comes to responding to that shooter. Because now, if you have the floor plan, if it's somewhere you go pretty frequently, if it's a building that you go in regularly, you know the personnel, you know the people who work there, you know the people who don't work there, it's going to cut down on your reaction time when it comes to responding to a shooter in that area. So, as an example, let's use, a bookstore, or probably a better example would be a movie theater. Movie theaters are probably the worst situation that I can think of as a citizen to be in if an active shooting event occurs, because most of the rooms are dark and everybody's facing the exact same direction, and some of them, the entrance is directly behind everyone who's in the room. You as a responding officer, do you know the floor plan layout of that theater? Do you know where the fire exits are? Do you know where the internal bones of the building are, such as employee-only access corridors and things of that nature based on the size of the theater? Do you know who works there? Do you know who works that specific day on the day that the event likely happens? Or the day that does happen. Knowing who to look for when you arrive, or knowing who's supposed to be where, will also help you cut down on misidentification of potential threats, and it'll give you much more credible information coming from someone that you have some kind of rapport with, versus responding and being like, this is the first time I've been in this building, I don't know any of these people, that guy kind of looks like he works here because he's dressed that way. These are precious fractions of seconds, and precious seconds, and maybe even precious minutes that you're not going to get back and you need to react to the situation. So you need to know where it's likely to happen. You need to know those floor plans. You need to get out of your car and interact with these people. You need to get out of your car and look at these buildings and walk through these buildings and get to know the floor plan intimately. Of course, knowing the floor plans of buildings and knowing the people who work there is helpful to the best of your ability. Obviously, not everybody's going to be able to have the excess time or extra time to dedicate to really involving themselves in getting to know these people and getting to know these floor plans. You may only be able to walk through 1 or 2 buildings a week, and that's good. Refresh your memory as necessary. Get to know those people. Also get to know the security staff if security staff is present. Don't have that introduction be literally when you respond to a hot call, or respond to a shooting in progress, or respond to whatever the call is. Get to know these guys ahead of time. instead of making that contact like, hey, I'm here to do some stuff. Oh, by the way, this is our security guard. These guys, especially places that have security, those guys are the first responders, armed or unarmed. They're going to be your initial lifeline when it comes to credible information if they're doing their job. For those security guards that are unarmed, there's not a whole lot they can do. Their job is kind of observe and report what you already know. But armed security, that's a force multiplier. You show up and he's there. You guys need to work together because he's immediately a second gun, a second set of eyes that can do work. There's that mentality, of course, that, cops handle cop stuff, and I get that, but he's present, and if he's willing, then you've already doubled your response force. And of course, waiting for backup is cool. In an active killer or active shooter event, you don't really have time to do that because, every shot fired is another potential lost life. If the shooting is still in progress, you need to close with and stop the shooter as quickly as possible. So you don't want to be tactically loitering, waiting on a team-based response, which brings me to the next point, training. Obviously, my mission in life, my occupation is an instructor. I'm a trainer, I'm a teacher, whatever terminology you want to use. So obviously, I'm going to be big pro training when it comes to the question, which was how best prepare myself for an active shooter event. You need to be trained. Your department may provide you with once a year active shooter refresher, active shooter training course. Maybe they sent you to a class. Maybe you went and learned the team-based response system. That's good. Technique is good. Learning how to work structures is really good. But it's not the end of the line. There's obviously other things you can do. You may have to take it upon yourself to do them, though, such as basic medical training. Do you know how to treat trauma? Do you know how to apply a tourniquet correctly, or do you just carry one and hope that, if the moment happens, you're just going to figure it out? Because tourniquets are great when applied correctly and when applied when they're actually needed. If you apply a tourniquet that isn't needed, well, then you've created additional issues. So training is obviously huge, but don't think about just the shooting aspect of it. Think about the medical aspect of it, the logistical aspect of it. If your department teaches a team-based response for active shooting and has some kind of policy where it's got to be 2 officers or it's got to be 4 officers, are you prepared for the exigency where you don't have time? You literally can see the shooter. Are you prepared for that event? Have you trained for a single officer response to an active shooting event? Some police departments have the luxury of having multiple officers available per shift. They're all relatively close together. You've got patrol areas that overlap. You've got other agencies that work together, such as urban environments. If you're a rural sheriff's deputy and your backup is 20 minutes away, what's your plan when the shooting pops off at a church or a school or something of that nature? Be prepared to have to do this by yourself. And if you think about it, you should be prepared for it. I know it's unfortunate if you have to work by yourself, but the alternative is wait for backup while people die, which is completely, to me, unconscionable. It's not something I'm going to be able to do. It's a personal decision, but just my own personal conscience wouldn't allow me to do that, and I don't think anybody watching this would fault me for that. I don't think you should fault yourself for being like, no, I got to go in. I don't have time to wait for other people to get there. So there are training classes. I offer one. There's schools offered from other people as well to teach single officer response tactics, and that's great. And that's something that you definitely want to pursue. Another big part of single officer response is mindset. I can't teach mindset. I can talk about what your mindset should be, but it's kind of like ethics. If someone is unethical, I can't teach them to be ethical. I can teach them to pretend to be ethical, but I can't teach them to be ethical. So it really comes down to a personal constitution issue. If you're not ready for that, if you really honestly don't think that that's something that you could do, then I can't fault you for that, but maybe you shouldn't be in the job that you're in. I've always felt that there were 3 types of police officers in this world. There were those that would do it for free if they could afford it. There are those who are just there for the paycheck and they do the very bare minimum to get by, such as meet the bare minimum in a gunfight. And then there's those guys that have absolutely no business wearing the badge whatsoever, and they are a stain on our profession. I like the cops that fit into the first category, guys that are really passionately about the job and they feel like their sole mission in life is to protect people. Because ultimately, that's how I've always felt my job in law enforcement is to protect the rights of people. And if someone is actively killing people, my job is to protect those people by stopping that shooter any means necessary. If that means entering a building by myself, that's exactly what I'm going to do. But I need to best prepare myself for that potential eventuality by training, preparing, and I guess the final topic, it basically comes down to gear. With gear, I get a lot of gear questions. Gear questions are going to be very policy driven, but let's look at that. Does your department issue you a patrol rifle? Are you allowed to put optics on that patrol rifle? Is that patrol rifle a reasonable length? Are you allowed to put a suppressor on that patrol rifle? Are you allowed to carry and seat as a primary magazine in that rifle, a 50 or 60 round drum. It may sound like overkill until you think about, I'm going to run into this building. I don't have time to fuck around with active shooter kits and Baker bat shields and all this other nonsense. I've got to get in there and do work. Active shooter response is slowly swinging the way of SWAT in that, like, we have all this extra gear that we got to grab and put on. If you have a go bag, that's great. Something you can throw on a backpack, something like that, awesome. But if you're going to spend 30 seconds screwing around in the trunk of your patrol car to put on 9 plate carriers and 14 ammunition pouches and your night vision and your fireman's act and your engineer tape, people are dying. If you can't grab it on the way, you have to ask yourself, do you really need it, or is it really worth it? And that's where, your patrol rifles come into play. Like, the rifle is going to give you increased standoff distance, it's going to be increased accuracy, and it's a superior weapon system to the handgun that you carry. So patrol rifles are something that has to be driven, and trained in practice consistently. If your department has archaic policies about patrol rifles, such as only SWAT gets lights or only SWAT gets red dots, take it upon yourself to do some research and write a justification for why patrol officers need to at least be able to buy their own optics from an approved list. If your department just doesn't have the funds because they had to buy a DARE car or something to buy you optics. Obviously, optics to me are the most important because first focal plane shooting is how you want to be. Muzzle devices. Do you run a flash hider? It's not a bad deal. Those people who complain about the recoil when it comes to flash hider probably just need to practice more. There are superior muzzle devices you can use, such as Thompson brakes. Shoot one of those indoors without ear pro, and you'll understand why a flash suppressor is a little bit more beneficial. If you can choose your muzzle device, stick with a flash hider. The only exception to that I'd make is something like a battle comp, where they're not so bad indoors, especially if you're going to work with another officer or work around people. That concussive blast can literally make it harder for you to see and shoot, because pressure is a thing, and you don't want to be eating all that PSI in a enclosed environment because you had to have a Lantac Dragon. Great muzzle devices, but they're not for what we're talking about. If you are not authorized suppressors, find out why. And if the why is, well, because movies in Hollywood, it's very easy to find justifications these days that you can easily write and repair or repurpose for your department to justify them. Now, of course, the general public watching this would probably, or maybe considerably, there may be some of you that have a problem with law enforcement having suppressors, and I don't really get that. Suppressor is not to make super silent assassin cops. It's literally to protect hearing, allow communication, and minimize as much as possible giving away your position to the bad guy when you start lighting him up. And if you're not getting good hits, and he's going to attenuate and try to vector in on where those shots are coming from. With a patrol rifle, you have an increased distance. You may be trying to peg this guy from the parking lot. So the whole purpose of the suppressor isn't to militarize law enforcement, it's to give them the advantages that you would want on your own personal home defense gun. And that is hearing protection, sound attenuation. For those law enforcement officers that are going to end up having to write these justifications, if you have to start from scratch for some reason, go the workers' comp route and be like, hey, cops lose their hearing when they shoot. So especially with rifles, which are, usually louder than handguns, factor in the reduction of workers' comp claims when it comes to hearing loss with the shooting of guns, especially if you're going to light up a 5.56 in an enclosed space such as a shopping center or a movie theater. Hearing loss is going to be a thing, so use that to justify suppressors. Again, you may have to find the way to purchase your own, and that's unfortunate because departments have to buy stuff and they're not going to buy you the equipment that you need. So the best advice I ever got as a young officer was, if you hold your breath and wait for your department to buy what you need, you will die. So it's probably better just to find a way to get it yourself. Grants, talk to other departments, look for trade-ins, look for the ability to get the gear that you need. Even if it's not ideal, work your way up through the quality of equipment. And I think that pretty much covers the topic. It's a very expansive topic, and one of the issues that we have is, all things considered, we get far more experience doing felony stops and just general compliant handcuffings and uncompliant handcuffings than we do with actual shooter responses. across the country, a police department may experience 1 or 2 active shooter events in a decade where they have to respond. So the lessons learned are very, very critical. But we also run the risk of using that small sample size to change the way we do everything nationwide, and that might not necessarily be the best response. Knee-jerk reactions are not a good thing. So if you're preparing to respond to an event, which is obviously better than reacting to an event with no training whatsoever, think about the long game when it comes to best preparing your department, best preparing every single officer to respond to these events. Get to know those other agencies, get out of the vehicle, talk to people as often as possible, get to know these floor plans. I'm Eric Howe with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.